Are you still doing the market?
I am, but next weekend is market day, so this I did like a visual fundraiser for regular weekend.
Cool.
It's pretty stressful about this.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. On a bicycle, getting on a bicycle more and then go shopping with some bicycle equipment, like the pants, like the fancy pants that they wear for bicycling.
Like the water.
Yeah, REI had butt, it's like $40, so it's not bad. Looking for it. So just like, I'm having, I can enjoy my money more, but then it's like, I don't want to go outside a lot, but now I feel better than saying, well, you're gonna say, yeah, a little more confident in being outside. Yeah, hopefully, yeah. Miss Dan a lot, because you and Mr. Bike Guy, you was out fighting every single day, you know? I think about him all the time. You would overdo everything. You would overdo it. That's great. Yeah. Any squirrels in your house?
No squirrels, no mice for a while.
Yeah, it's amazing.
What have you been up to?
Helping neighbors, doing my consulting and advocacy on computers and stuff, and doing really good.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Hey, Nathan. Yeah, I just was talking to last Martha about using contractors for the sanctuary work.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
And, well, that's fine. Like, Owen says, well, here, use our company, use the company that, well, I was like, we got contractors, we can't come in.
Yeah. So,
Like going back to KMNX.
and he's gonna come look at it.
Yeah, that'd be great. If you could send them an email or
Okay.
something, that'd be great.
All right.
Because they can do the same thing. And they're indigenous and they need,
Yeah, no, I should try to look at it.
yeah. And it's just HVAC. It doesn't look like it's not coming from the ceiling.
Good.
It's
I'm
coming.
glad we got that. I actually need to. I didn't follow up on an email
Yeah,
chain
that's all right.
that I should have.
But yes. How's Eli?
It's okay. Yeah, he stepped over at his grandparents, stage parents.
I've been talking to that, and this is,
So he's always, whenever that happens, he's always very clean.
Good morning.
now we're just, this is.
Hello, welcome to our adult forum this Sunday. And we have special guests, but I'll have Pastor Obi introduce them. But actually, this forum is a starting journey, hopefully until May, for us to expand our RIC welcome statement. And currently, well, we'll share what we have on the bulletin about us. Just wanted to, we'll read that, maybe Pastor Obi will share that with everybody, what is missing in our welcome statement. And we have wonderful LGBTQIA community leaders that are here with us to share what are those meaningful
Is it not on the
ways
weekly
and welcoming
update? Should be on the
ways
weekly. I don't know. I
for
haven't
us
checked.
as a community here at our church to continue to commit with our RIC statement, but also our worship and our lives here.
No, we're on Zoom.
Together with
It should
our
be. There should
LGBTQIA,
be
and as well
a link,
as
but I don't see a link on
promote and commit
That's a
to
problem.
being allies.
It is being recorded.
for,
I'll put it up on YouTube after during the service.
diverse
So
community
yeah.
and for people of color, people of cultures as well, and people of identity. So so the next Sunday, the following Sunday, Pastor Martha will be here. I will be at the women's retreat, but we will discuss more about what we learned today, what we heard, and what would it look like to expand our welcome statement. And then there'll be like in March, we have Dr. Cody Sanders will be coming from Luther Seminary. He's a professor for pastoral care and community, and he'll come for another forum and maybe preaching time. And then we'll discuss more and have a final version, and hopefully May 31st, we can vote on it and celebrate our welcome statement. So I give the floor to Pastor Obi.
Good morning. I'm going to stand just so I can see others. Folks on the panel can decide whether to stand or not. But a word about kind of where we're going in the next hour or so, and then I'll introduce and invite us to introduce ourselves. I feel called to this work not only because of my loyalty to this congregation and community, Javen and I are members here, but also that the organization that I founded last year, Prism, is really has been about the work over the last year of listening to LGBTQ people and allies in the cities, but especially beyond the cities, to say, what do we need now in the year 2025, 2026? What do our LGBTQ communities need? And some of it is learning more. And so I felt prepared and called to invite open this conversation. And Pastor Esther invited me to join the RIC committee that's looking at what it looks like to expand our reconciling in Christ statement. And the forum that we're doing today is to help the church and those who are joining us online and to ground us in a little more information about what does it mean to be transgender identity. Most of us, in my experience, people in welcoming communities around the state understand gay and lesbian, probably understand bi, and some understand what it is to be trans as well. But it's something like 0.6% of the population is trans, and so you may or may not have ever met a trans person, or if you did, you may not have known it. So we've got trans folks in the community here, and we've got other opportunities to learn about other things that people have lifted up within the LGBTQIA2S+ acronym.
This is from
that's being
Marky.
thrown around.
She can't find the link.
The link wasn't on the weekly
So
update.
today we're looking
Sunday
at
update.
more
So
at
I can
what it
hear.
is to be
Let me.
trans.
I'll text. I'll email you the link that I can do right here, and
Okay.
then
Yeah.
if you could like email it to her.
Yeah, I could so.
We'll be looking at, what does it look like to expand our understandings of relationship beyond monogamy? Because there are some folks who fall into that expression. What does it mean? What does it impact for us in terms of pastoral care and communities of faith? Can we explore that together? I also remember people in our listening sessions who are asexual. What does that mean? And how does our statement lead us into that? We'll get to those conversations, and I trust that there's a lot of wisdom in the room and in those we know to speak to some of that. But for today, we're going to invite each of our panelists, who are all leaders with Prism, by the way. These are all members of our Prism leadership team and folks with faith backgrounds. Though not everyone on the panel has a strong positive experience of faith. And as you know, LGBTQ people more broadly have really had to fight an uphill battle in the church and beyond the church. So we're sitting in that tension, but we'll each take about, I won't, but each of our panelists will take about 5 minutes to talk about their experience, their journey, and anything they wanted to share. And then I'm hoping we'll have a more open conversation. And I just wanted to start us by grounding us in the statement that we currently have We currently have one sentence that's at the top of the bulletin under the second sentence in the About Us. Says, a reconciling in Christ congregation, we celebrate our diversity of age, race, gender identities, sexual orientations, culture, and citizenship. That was our statement of welcome. I think it's been nearly 20 years from since early 2000s. So that was bold and strong then. It leaves a fair amount out now of what human beings have learned and what we've learned as a culture and communities in the 20 years since. So I'm going to invite our panelists to say more about their own experience. We have Amber Charlton and Perry Charlton. They are married. They live in, I want to say Apple Valley, but it's Farmington. I always see them at events. I always see the events in Apple Valley. So in Farmington, and Cascadesville is the convener of our and others, and the leader of our Queer and Disabled group that gathers among us. So we'll have them introduce themselves more, and then invite you to ask what questions come to me. Amber.
My name is Amber Charlton. I guess my journey to be trans. So I grew up in Stillwater, Roman Catholic background, Catholic on both sides of my family. Had a very good relationship with the church growing up. I think sometimes some of the outside voices that we hear from such a large denomination or large faith group can kind of influence how we feel about ourselves. So I didn't receive that sort of outward or any kind of pushback from my family members or the people at the parishes that I went to growing up. But I did hear it in the media, and I heard it from other people that claimed to represent the religion that I was a part of. So I think that it kind of was discouraging for me quite a bit growing up, and kind of led me to drive away a little bit from those sorts of feelings that I had. But once I kind of started to accept who I was after being in the military for about 8 years, I kind of, got to the point where I was almost had an F it attitude. I was like, I'm going to do what I want. It's my life. And I came out shortly after leaving the military, right before Trump was getting ready to kick all trans people out of the military. I made a decision to just kind of separate myself because my contract was up. And since then, I've kind of been through this journey of faith of trying to find my way back to the church that I grew up in. Like I said before, kind of hearing a lot of those outside messages from people that are on the more conservative bent of Catholicism kind of drove me away and really scared me from ever returning back to the church, despite the fact that a lot of the messages that we hear in Rome are quite positive towards the LGBTQ community, at least within reason. It's an old church. It's very large. So religion has always been a major aspect of my life. It's how I express myself. It's what drives me every day to wake up. It informs every decision in my life. So kind of coming back to that over time was something that was a full, complete, rotation of who I am as a person, or completion of who I am as an individual. Kind of allowing myself to face those fears and not really care, or understanding, within a structure of that size, that you have to trust the structure at the top and what they say about us, and, kind of allowing myself to come back into the religion that matters so much to me. I want to say I was one of those kids who played with girls' toys and all of that growing up, but I feel like those stereotypes kind of get lost in the sauce at times and don't really inform us much about the individual. The biggest aspect for me personally was just kind of understanding who I was as a person and wanting to be a complete person and wanting to show that world the complete person that I was. I had always been driven towards these things that maybe seen as more feminine rather than more masculine. Again, I don't really like that as a information, but sometimes it can inform certain aspects. For me, it did. it kind of informed who I was, informed the complete person that I wanted to become, and allowed me to really discover over time, my own individuality and exist within a larger system. I think a lot of the times some people might get interested in, especially when we hear stuff from more conservative aspects of the media, trans people just want attention, they're doing it so people look at them or anything. And I would say it's the exact opposite. Often, I think Obi knows that I really don't like attention. In this situation, it's quite a bit different. But, I don't want anybody paying attention. I just really want to live my nice little boring life. I like things that way. But, yeah, sorry, I was so on the spot, I didn't really know what to say. I was very It's a compliment this evening.
Now I gotta follow that.
Yeah.
So hi, I'm Carrie. Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of what you said, because we're in the same place.
Yeah.
My kind of journey, I grew up, so I'm not originally from Minnesota. I grew up, I was born in Arkansas. I grew up Arkansas, Texas, that kind of move around family, and was raised in a bit more conservative Church of Christ, like Southern Protestant religion. It was a time where folks were, parents were told to be scared of their gay kid and send them to conversion camp and make sure. So I learned pretty quickly to keep my opinions to myself. So nobody sent me anywhere I didn't want to go. But I was heavily involved in church growing up. It was actually, surprisingly, it was a place where I made a lot of friends, did mission trips as a teenager, but, felt a lot of camaraderie, but still amongst people that would tell me, as long as I behave this way, I'm good and I'll go to heaven. If I stray from that, then I would, lose them all. And that was kind of a concern. I also joined the military out of high school. I spent 8 years active duty in the Air Force, and I think the difference with me too is like I served.
I sent a Zoom link to Esther. What's your email? Can you
DW? So as a personal specialist, I actually was one of the people that had to process individuals out of the military.
DW stop 57. Oh, there we go.
It was weird. It was, being in the military,
I will send you that.
masculine.
Okay, and I'll just forward it
on.
Thank you.
Applauded in the military to be quite masculine. So, we were able to hide pretty well, but a lot of my gay friends who were more feminine really had a hard time hiding. And so we kind of banded together in that aspect. For me, though, I didn't really come out until my early 40s. And that publicly, like I just kind of kept to myself. I was, a teenager in the 90s, and they said, that was the thing that they tell all women or girls is, like they thought I was bisexual at the time. And they say, yeah, everybody goes through that. It's a phase. You'll grow out of it. So I waited to grow out of it. And by my late 30s, I was like, okay, I've grown out of this. There might be something here. My biggest concern coming out was my children. I've got 3 boys. Now they're 17, 19, and 24. And I remember coming out individually to each of them. My concern was, how will they take it? Will this scare them to learn something different about their parent? And then how will they be treated? And each kid came to me, when I spoke to each of them, my oldest was saying, you're just my mom. I want you to be happy. Our middle one said, cool. And the youngest said, okay, what's for dinner? Eating here. So yeah, I mean, one of the things that was really important to me, like after, kind of starting to figure out how to live as myself, because I was living to serve others and not what was me. As Obi and I talked a year ago when we started all of this, and I sit as the chair of Prism. I kept saying to you, I'm frustrated. Like, at what point in my life do I get to decide how I live? Why do others get to decide? Why do others get to say what I do or don't do with my body, or how I present, or how, yeah. I mean, I always, Amber and I joke that we have more of a typical suburban life than most anybody else does. She's a stay-at-home wife. I work in a finance office. It's super boring. I got a riding mower. Yeah, we're just really normal suburban people. And yeah, it's I think people get surprised at how similar our lives are compared to others. It's not being trans is not my identifier. I just happen to be trans. There's a much more, about us.
Wow, I feel a lot of resonance, especially with Perry's story, because I grew up in rural Iowa, in a small town, in a Southern Baptist church. So yeah, if any of you know, kind of what that was like. Yeah, I think like growing up gay was, best case scenario, a mental illness, and worst case scenario, moral and spiritual depravity. So I just never asked myself the question because it was like, well, like that's not me. Like there was just no possibility of those things being true. And despite that, I had so many people in my life that were queer, that were LGBTQ, and it always had this sort of like cognitive dissonance where, I'm being told like being gay is like the worst possible thing you can be, but I have all these really beautiful, lovely, caring people around me that are queer that I resonate with, that I connect with really deeply. And so for me, it was just sort of this journey of like becoming ready to ask myself those questions. I'm becoming ready to kind of unweave, like Perry said, all these like external expectations that had been placed on me or my body or my identity. And really being like brave enough and courageous enough to say like, okay, I'm gonna like look inward, and I'm gonna start like admitting to myself like all of these things that were true all along, but that I just didn't either feel safe enough or like have the space to sort of think about or reflect on. And yeah, I mean, I like similar to Perry too, loved the community aspect of church, always felt very at home there. Also just loved the really, I'm gonna say like radical welcome and grace of Jesus as like this person. And I no longer identify as Christian, I identify as like humanist spiritualist, but I think Jesus has so much to teach us about what love can be. And I think part of my own journey of like accepting myself as trans, as gender fluid, as poly, as any other one of those identifiers was like, why have I limited like what love can be? Why have I limited what I can be? And instead of seeing queerness or my whatever, like my identity as something that was, I'm gonna say like contrary to divine spirit, it was almost this revelation of like, what if this is an augmentation of divine spirit? What if like accepting my full true identity and self is just like admitting a fuller expression of divine presence and divine love within me. So that was, I also, it took me a long time. So that didn't happen until right around COVID, I would say. So it's been 5 or 6 years now-ish of just sort of, unraveling those external expectations and learning to love myself again. And there's a lot of unpacking there, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that just sort of, slipped its way into like my subconscious and my mind. And I think that's work that we're like all invited into, no matter who you are, no matter what your identity or sexuality is, learning, to let love be like expansive.
Thank you each for saying yes to being here this morning, for saying yes to yourselves and the spirit within you. And I'm going to invite the room to start sort of thinking about what would help you to understand more, as the church continues to discern what does expanding our welcome look like. And a comment that I wanted to sort of make as we start to think about is, this isn't going to be a time where we ask one another about body choices, kind of how does trans manifest for you, surgeries, things like that. Those can be very intrusive conversations and are best had directly and at the decision of someone who chooses to disclose that. To just name the breadth of things. Some people live and are trans without ever making any chemical or surgical modifications. There are others for whom those surgeries are important milestones that are marked as anniversaries and that are formations, very formative of how people live our lives. It's also, and this is going to be a question I'm going to pose to the panel here in a moment, it's also it's a spectrum. Trans identity is a spectrum, just as all of sexual identities are a spectrum, and maybe even spectrum, presuming one side and another side, maybe that's even too narrow. It's a whole field. And so for some trans folks, there is I began and was recognized and was affirmed as this gender, and now I identify as that other gender. It's a binary transformation for some trans folks. And for others, it's I have always been me. The labels people apply to me are different, and I choose to make changes in my appearance in order to most fully be me. And I reject that there are male and female, that binary altogether. That's the language of gender queer that is sometimes lifted up as saying, don't put me in either box of masculine or feminine. And I also, so I'm going to invite those on the panel who want to, and then I'll open it up for other questions. How does the masculinity and femininity expectations and the male and female expectations of broader society, how does that affect your life? How does that affect you as trans people as you go through church and world more broadly? Is that clear enough? The binary expectations of the world, how does that impact your experience as a trans person? Cass, can I pass it back to you?
Yeah.
Come on back. Not everyone has to speak, but you want to.
I love this question so much. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with Alok Vaid-Menon. They are a trans activist and poet and artist. I highly encourage you to look up some of their work. But I really deeply resonate with a lot of things they talk about in terms of gender as play, as playfulness, as this really deep, sort of existential thing within yourself that, again, it's a process of like self-love and self-discovery. And I think a lot of our societal expectations around gender are born of fear and scarcity mindset sometimes, and also they're riddled with power dynamics. They're riddled with, all of these oppressive sort of forces. And I want to say really clearly that I do not hate or think that what it means to be man, what it means to be a woman, what it means to have that binary is bad. And I think a lot of gender fluid and like trans non-binary people would agree with that like just because something is playful and expansive and this beautiful spectrum of variety like does not in any way diminish like the other experiences that people have. So if you're hearing this and you're thinking, well, does this mean that gender just like doesn't exist? No, like if what it means to you to be a woman or to be a man has certain elements, I think that's good and lovely and holy. And like the beauty of humanity and how I think like divine spirit imbues all of us is that no one way is the be all end all of that gender or of gender expression. And so when Alok says like gender is play, I think again really that's just that like I think curiosity serves us more than certainty and being open to like what life can be. And so for me, a lot of the gender or societal expectations, they just feel like when they are posed as absolutes or as like non-negotiables, they can feel very suffocating and very stifling. I think that assumptions about gender or gender norms or gender roles really just limit how we're able to like see and interact with people as individuals. And that like if you can look beyond like and look through some of those norms and like expectations, like wow, the breadth and the depth of the humanity around you. So for me, that's, I don't know, I guess like my relationship to a lot of those things is that, yeah, how trans people are treated, how trans people are talked about, how women are treated, how men are treated, right? Like it's not, I think that taking time to become curious about where those norms and expectations come from and how they might be more wiggly than, you know, like we think more, yeah, what we think, so.
So this is where I get to nerd out. I have my master's in working on my PhD in psychology of gender and sexual fluidity. So I talk about this crap all the time.
All right.
You know, the interesting thing is to take a look at, you know, where we define sex versus gender. And we like to muddy those words together. And sex simply means the sex you are assigned at birth. It's based on your reproductive organs, level of hormones, XY chromosomes, that's it. And then when it comes to gender, the idea of gender, so that's, you know, sex, you're talking male, female, and maybe even in intersex. Gender, you're talking man, woman, transgender, you know, non-binary. There's things that people that live outside the binary. But the social construct of gender was created post World War II, and it was in the early 1950s. The point of that was during World War II, when women started to work in factories, and then women started to get that independence of working. When soldiers came home, everyone expected the women to go back to their home, go back to being a homemaker, and women said, "No, I actually like the independence of work." So they started to group human behaviors with your gender or your sex. There's been tons and tons of studies. There's a study theory called the gender continuum hypothesis, where researchers took like 46 different meta-analysis of human behavior when it comes to emotions versus aggression versus toughness versus opinionated. And found as humans, we are 86% more alike than we are different. So being someone that cries at movies does not make you feminine. Being someone that wants to punch someone when you're angry does not make you masculine. These are just human behaviors. So the fact that all people can experience all different types of human behaviors, and it doesn't necessarily define who they are as gender. But to your point as well, you know, it doesn't mean that people don't exist in a binary. People who are born female, choose to be feminine, project voice, clothing, everything. That's a valid thing. It's just so are all the other options. Yeah, I mean, for me now, in the world I live in now, I honestly feel more myself than I ever did before, and not called a brash woman. Now I'm just a man with opinions. No one wants to listen. That's welcome to manhood.
Yeah, I always like this question in a sense that I feel like the argument from some people that maybe want to bash trans people is that, well, women do things one way and men do things this way. And I always like to think, you know, I take a couple of examples of like sports fandom, you know, in my family, sports are huge. They care so deeply about everything about sports. And that's men and women. Like my grandma will scream at the TV while the Packers are on, like just screaming. Like, stays up for every game, never misses a game. she's better about that than she is about going to mass. Like this is a Packers game. She's in her 80s now. And, you know, to me, for me growing up, that was always seen as, well, that's not a feminine trait or a masculine trait. That's just a trait. You know, and I think about kind of the kindness and soft nature, you know, that people have is seen as feminine. Well, when I went for my confirmation to my grandmother, and she picked St. Francis for me for my confirmation saint, because I was a caretaker and because I was kind natured, gentle. And you know, St. Francis is well beloved in our church, and because of his kind nature and because of his gentleness. So where does that sit in that sort of binary line? I don't think it really applies to anyone. People are individuals. You know, each one of us has our own aspects. I don't think that makes you any less feminine or any less masculine. You just are a person at the end of the day, and we're all complete in that own way. Yeah.
You remind me of this. Jesus says in John's Gospel, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. What we're working for, what we're trying to create in the church and in society is the space and freedom to live abundantly and fully as God has made us in all the different forms that looks like. To have life and have it abundantly is Jesus' wish for us. What questions are in the room and for the panel? And I would invite us to, I'll probably repeat it so that folks online can hear, and I'll pass the mic to anyone who wants to respond. Yeah, Steve.
So back a few months ago, or maybe a year ago now, maybe more, when J.K. Rowling was in the news about having really strong opinions about trans people. And I was in communication with my niece, who's my wife's brother's daughter, and just raised up one little piece of what she was saying, which was that being a trans woman and being a woman are not the same thing because it's not the same life experience. And I just put that out there gingerly. And my niece she just jumped down. She's had cis, you know, married, baby. She just jumped down my throat in a way that was not expected as her favorite uncle. And I just backed off, and we did not speak again for a year. I wasn't mad, but I was sort of waiting for her to say something about that. And we were talking again, but she still hasn't said anything about that. So I kind of wanted to just lay that thing out there about, you know, being a woman born with female, you know, chromosome and all that stuff, and being a person who has come to understand themselves as being a woman. Is it okay to say those are two different experiences in life? I mean, like, those are not the same thing.
So the question, to summarize, Dave, is...
This is from a position of like, I am totally on board with people understanding them to be who they are, right?
So the question is, is it okay to, and recognize that we aren't speaking for the whole communities everywhere, but is it okay, or how would we respond to the suggestion that someone who has whose gender and sexual identity as woman were assigned at birth and that remains who they are and how they are now, is it okay to say that that experience is different from someone who has transitioned and is now identifying as a trans woman?
And I should say, in all honesty, that Rowling was making the point that the two can't be put together because cis women have fought through a lot and have earned a lot out of their own experiences as cis women, and that it isn't somehow fair. I mean, I'm not
sure. Yeah.
That to conflate it. So it wasn't like it was totally without any, you know, animus, but yeah.
Okay. Yep. I'm going to pass this to you, Amber.
Yeah. I mean, I'll first tackle that sort of rhetoric of like, women have earned, people have earned rights.
Mm-hmm.
You know, regardless of what our gender is, we've earned equality, we've worked towards that. And to say that the experience is different, I would say that's the same as saying that my experience as a trans woman, Catholic from Minnesota, it's going to be a lot different than, say, I don't know, a 30-year-old Chinese woman from Beijing. You know, like, of course it's going to be different, naturally, or even different than, you know, somebody from California or somebody from Texas. Of course my experience is going to be different. All of our experiences are different. I think sometimes wading around in those waters to say, well, we need to be able to state that it's different, that this is different than that. I don't really see what that brings to the table. You know what I mean? Yes, of course it's different. Now, where does that lead us in the conversation? If we admit that, then what does that bring us? I don't really think it brings us any kind of peace. If you want to say it's different, say it's different. What's the point? I don't know. You know? Yeah. Yeah.
So just to iterate kind of Perry's like history of gender spectrum and power dynamics within that, I think I do not know like why, you know, this was such a, you know, like a visceral and whatever potent experience for your niece, but I do know that as someone who's heard sort of statements like that, your ears perk up a little bit, because sometimes when people ask that question, what they mean is like, you're not woman enough, or like, you're not this enough. And I think that really stems from like patriarchal sort of like colonizer ideology about, you know, gender being this sort of thing that you have to like check all these boxes to be legitimate in. And it's this form of legitimacy that earns you social capital. And if you do not check those boxes and you do not adhere to these like social norms, and like women being passive or women being agreeable instead of like, you know, pardon my French, but like, you know, bossy or bitchy, like it's all of those things that were sort of created to keep people in these boxes and kind of in line with these power dynamics. And so it's like, I don't think that, again, like Amber said, I don't think that question is necessarily like wrong or bad, but like, again, like why? Like why ask it or why say it? Like, and for someone like J.K. Rowling to say that thing, like I think her intent is pretty clear. You know, because of all of the other rhetoric. So if that question comes from a place of genuine curiosity, like Amber said, you know, about like all of our experiences being different, then that's great, that's fine, like whatever. But if it comes from a place of like, do you count as this gender? Do I, as another person, get to look at you and determine or judge whether or not your experience is valid or deserves rights or deserves love? Like that's something that's a totally different conversation.
Hey, Obi, can I add another layer to this
Yeah.
same question? Oh. And that is just to say that I speak, my position, my place is I'm a gay man living in a 40-year marriage with a woman, happily. And my experience when I'm in the community is that I self-censor. I don't feel as though I mean, I've lived with the privilege of being a straight man my whole life. And that was partly why I did it, you know, because there was something I wanted to do with, there were a couple of things I wanted to do with my life, and that was the most important thing. So I sort of stay quiet and listen, and I don't like claim any authority or based on my sexual orientation, because I don't think I've earned it. So I asked the question, not just from the perspective of that interaction with my niece, who I love dearly, by the way, but also from my own position and kind of seeing it from the opposite side from J.K. Rowling's position as she raised. I just want to put that piece. And does that change your answer at all?
No, I appreciate that. No, I get what you're asking. You know, the thing that we find when it comes to this kind of like, when there's rhetoric on that side, it's a fear of no longer being special. It's what we call social identity threat. You know, our narrative has been, we've worked so hard. So if I put it in perspective of women, you know, we worked so hard to get the equality that we had. We had to fight for our right to vote. We have to fight for our ability to choose for our body, and that's been taken away from us again. And if you come and also say that you're what I am, then how does my story still remain special? We think that, unfortunately, and common, it's people that think that inclusion or diversity is like pie, you know, that if you take a slice, there's less slice for me. It's not, it's all around. And it's just funny because this is all reminding me of a time I was doing some type of panel and I was talking about what women have gone through and childbirth and that stuff. And I got a comment later from a lady that she was like, I had no idea what I was talking about. And she would talk about women's problems. And I was like, giving birth to 3 children. I do know what I'm talking about. It's funny, the less I look like a woman, the more I don't know anything about women. I'm told. So that's what I mean. It's just all perspective. People think that, you know, you have to be just like me to understand what I go through. It's not true. It's just giving everybody space to have their story.
Thank you very much. We've got a few more questions. We've got maybe about 10 more minutes, and so I want to invite us to keep I'll try to keep my remarks short, and let's keep our questions as focused as possible to get as many. Yeah, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing on. There is not a binary chromosome issue here either, because so I'm a physician. I've been a physician for 20 years, and it's really important to understand that the biology is incredibly, beautifully diverse. And it starts out from the gametes. So you can have an X and you can have a Y, or you can have it. So you might have a chunk of this chromosome or a piece of that chromosome, or this chunk might be different than that person's. And it's not a simple binary XXXY situation to start with, but that's just the beginning, because those come together to make a little embryo, and that little gamete, man, it's got all kinds of ideas. It's hormone influences. The enzymes are working differently because the genes that made those enzymes are differently. So even if you make testosterone, you might not receive testosterone. And so, and then the environmental influences come in, and that can change the how people come out. And then when they come out of the other human, they have different bits to start with. You know, everybody's bits look a little different when they're born and throughout their life, regardless of what their gender or their sex is. The bits are all different. I've been looking at bits for 20 years. All the bits are different. Same bits.
Thank you for that reassurance.
And it turns out the most important organ for gender and sexuality is the human brain.
Yeah.
The thing that we understand the least. And so I can't tell you by looking at your bits what your gender is, because I don't know what's going on in your brain. And so if you go on the internet, people are like, it's very simple, XXXY. But it is not even close to being that simple, just from a pure biologic perspective. So when people say biologic female, I'm like, what are they talking about? That's not even a thing. But this is what I learned when I was in middle school biology back in 1980 something. You know, it's a very, very behind the times, really not understanding the basic biology that we understand right now. So just wanted to put that out there, that we are biologically beautiful and diverse. Yes.
There's no way I can summarize that with the passion that Laura brought to it. Please seek out Laura for more conversation on that. It's enough to summarize for those who are online who might not have heard that even our biology and our chemistry that makes us human beings with genes and cells and gametes, we are all different shades and flavors from one another. It's not simply XX and XY. It is, as this church sings, a dazzling bouquet. Yes, please.
This is a kind of maybe boring question, but I have thought, how do we present ourselves as a church as welcoming? I think the reconciled in Christ sounds like nothing. I was from the outside world. I wouldn't even catch that.
Yeah, I thought you were doing it.
And so,
Say it again.
I said it sounded like you were doing your taxes with Christ, right?
and also you have to do a little bit of a deep search into the website. So this is a huge, long, big question. I get it. But is there something the other church, what do people do? We can just immediately
To be continued
Oh,
next
that's
week.
next week.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so next week's forum will address this question more directly of what would it look like
Sorry.
to live out a broader, more visible, expansive inclusion of rainbow communities, and what does it look like beyond putting in a statement? Certainly the statement needs to, reflect what we understand now, and how do we live beyond that? Anyone want to speak to that, Cass?
Yeah, just as somebody who's done a lot of church shopping as a trans person, I can say that whether or not you know the terminology, some things that I tend to look for in a church is where's your money going? Like, do you have partner organizations in the community that are trusted, that are queer, that like you're like actively working with or partnering with or giving money? Second, like, do you have ongoing sort of like DEI education? Like, that tells me a lot about a space, because DEI is not one and done. Like, DEI is like a continual spirit of humility and learning. So that tells me a lot about whether a congregation. Also, like, if I show up, are there other trans people there? And that one's kind of hard, because you got to build momentum. Like, sometimes if you don't have a lot of trans folks, and then trans folks show up and they're like, oh, there's no trans people here, maybe it's not safe. So that one you kind of got to like build slowly and build up. But those are 3 things that I definitely look for if I'm church shopping.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people want to get really excited and they want to put pride flags everywhere and be like, please come in. And and I think that's lovely, and the sentiment behind that is beautiful. But I think sometimes, and I'm not saying that pride flag is any problem, but sometimes it can kind of teeter on pandering, and it can kind of feel like, oh, now we're being othered in an opposite way than we were before. So I think sometimes, like, the way that my parish does it is just a big capital ALL. All are welcome, regardless of where you're at. Everyone on their journey at any time, any point, no matter what, And I think just having that sort of welcoming. And then if you go to my parish's website, you'll still find LGBTQ outreach. You'll find other organizations that we work with. But from the get-go, it's just stating very openly, all are welcome here. Just as Jesus would have.
Yeah. Other questions, sir? Karen? Yeah. Karen.
This was my question. Just how do we think about a space when people come into it at any identity, where we go, if I can do here, and I feel safe here? That's a question I'd love to just engage more broadly. Should we, imagine what the space looks like? There are physical aspects of that, there's vibes aspects to that. There are community aspects to that, so much more to unpack. And please start to step into it.
How do we create space physically and emotionally and spiritually where people feel welcome? And please, yes.
The other thing that we don't want to do too, though, is like I had a conversation the other day with a couple of lesbians who were church shopping. They were like, we went into a church and it's literally like immediately brought us to the only other. Like lesbians in the church. Like that would be their only, like it was like, no, we want to be everybody. Like so we just have to be like cautious that like we're not kind of committing some like unintentional what I want to say like segregation of some sort, but like we're not intending to be intentional. We are, but we are being unconscious. Putting you in a box.
The instinct of trying to make sure that folks can see themselves or see others in their community in the church does have an implicit othering practice on it, like you would need to see someone else in your community who identifies with you in order to feel welcome. And that's not necessarily what LGBTQ people are looking for in church, and it's does have the consequence of othering. So as we declare and proclaim and create communities where all are welcome, how do we do so in ways that are authentic and not performative or that reinscribe segregation?
Speak to that real quick. Yeah, I would say that the easiest way to go about that would just be if you're introducing somebody who's a new couple, let's say the new lesbian couple, let's say they're in their mid-30s. Find other couples that are in their mid-30s. Do they have kids? you find other couples that have kids. Just kind of introduce them in that way, like where you're still welcoming them, obviously as a part of the group, but that shows we're not welcoming you as the lesbian couple. We're welcoming you as the new couple here. Oh, do you have kids? Here's our Sunday school. Here's some other parents with kids. Do you like doing this? Like, do you like volleyball? We have a volleyball team. I don't know, whatever you guys.
And really quick, I just want to say to you that a lot of this is just about being willing to be in a culture of rupture and repair. So like you're never going to know all the right answers, and that's okay. And I'm sure Cody will talk way more about this because I just want to say too, there are a lot of people who spend their whole lives studying, or not studying, but like being advocates about about these things, or like really really looking at like the ins and outs of welcome and how to put those pieces together. Obviously, that's like a whole process of discernment that you guys are going to have to figure out for yourselves. But I think one of the biggest things you can do is like learn from the people who've already kind of done that work or made those mistakes, but then also just be willing to like if you put your foot in your mouth or you whatever, like if you're coming with a spirit of love and humility, like I think people are gonna feel that, and I think that's gonna speak more than like whether or not I do the right thing in a situation.
I would just say quickly, I think if I think about like especially religious organizations, places that you and I have gone, where we felt the most welcome is where people just treated us like everybody else.
Yeah.
We're just like, that's just a couple. Like we didn't have a lot of questions. People would go, am I using the right hand?
Yeah.
I appreciate those, well, wanting to make sure they get it right. But just treat people like people.
Well, I just want to say that it is very appropriate we're having this discussion on Susan B. Anthony's birthday.
Today is Susan B. Anthony's birthday, so we're having this conversation, extending further the work that Susan B. Anthony did for inclusion.
That's a loud opinion.
That's a loud opinionated woman. Yeah. Yeah, Pastor Esther.
Well, maybe it's something that maybe you can give us, you saw about us in our goals and what's your advice? What can we add or expand in that statement what we're going to be talking about?
What would help in a statement of welcome or a reconciling in Christ statement? What would help to communicate some of what we've been describing in terms of an open and welcoming spirit? Cass.
I took kind of a big leap of faith, leap of courage, and put poly in my bio. That's the first time I've done that publicly, so I just want to say that I was one step away from being ordained in the ELCA as a deacon, and part of my decision to walk away was the non-welcoming of ELCA congregations toward poly couples and E&M couples. So we don't have time to unpack, all of what that is or what that means. I just I know that Obi had kind of brought that up, and if and when Cody comes in and maybe talks about things, but again, people have done a lot of work tying Christian and as my friend says, Jesusian theology to those things, and have spent time thinking about how the words in the life of Jesus book end with all of these different identities. So that tends to be one that makes people, I think, even still uncomfortable, even within like if you're gay or lesbian, but then you might think that poly is this really weird or maybe again morally depraved thing. But my plea would be to listen to Christian poly couples, or listen to people that have done the work of unpacking what it means to welcome or include that. I know that some churches also put stuff in there about disability or neurodivergence, and I think that is maybe an opportunity or a separate conversation, but those are also two identifiers that I would say are important just to be aware of, even if you don't add them to your statement.
I think the one thing that you would want to avoid just if you're rewriting the statement, is just listing a laundry list of different identities. I think sometimes keeping it, we call it in the Navy, we call it KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And I think sometimes the most simplistic way What's that?
So we use it in the university.
Oh, okay, I guess it's all branches, yeah. Yeah, all the branches. But yeah, just kind of keeping it simple. Like I said, sometimes that two sentences of all or welcome. No, really, we mean all, and then just kind of leaving it at that and letting people make their own decisions from there is sometimes a little bit easier for everyone. Yeah.
So wait, can I ask a question? So I heard you say though, that it would be helpful to say, like Polly, or the, and then also hearing at the same time, don't say, list everything.
Yeah, the question, the tension that we're naming, that we're experiencing up here is, how much are you explicit about the welcome in terms of identities and groups, and how much do you keep it as expansive as possible and just say all? I'm curious to know. I've got an answer on that, but I'm curious to know what others.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say, yeah, don't overthink it. I mean, it's, for many of us, it's not about what you have written down in a program, it's how you treat everybody. So you can say anything in there, but it's how the congregation treats people when they come in. If you're treating people with love and welcome, and not putting any parameters on that based on identity or race or anything, you're doing just fine. That's all you need to do.
I would say those identifiers are just a starting point for more learning. Like Amber said, like again, like if you're just trying to list them in your bio so those kinds of people like see that and then come in, like that's like absolutely the wrong way to go about it. But if those identifiers are just a place for you to start listening and reading and learning and building relationships in the community, or partnering, or again, but like becoming more aware, becoming safer, like that's the point. So if your church, decides to put those things in, great. If you decide not to, great. Like I think ultimately it's just about kind of like Perry said, like your level of awareness and like how you can live out and embody the fullness of that all.
I thought it was, so last Sunday I preached at Bethel Lutheran Church in Northfield. And it was they have reworked their welcome statement, and I was struck by the artfulness of what they do. There is a identity statement, welcome statement, but then they address the person. We welcome you, your age, ability, and education, your race, ethnicity, and citizenship, your sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, your relationship status, and family structure. And there's it goes on to talk about our work of welcome includes these things: loving, forgiving, serving one another, advocating for those marginalized and oppressed. These things, but that's a way of naming the communities and the ways that we play, also saying you. It's really beautiful. And also saying we're on our journey. Yeah. Because it says your questions and doubts have a home here. We're nearing the end we're at the end of our forum time, and the children are going to invite us in to partake in more individual food and such before worship at 10:30. I'll say I'm around to visit with. Javen, my husband, is also on the RIC team. Others on the RIC committee who are here, would you raise your hand if you want to engage in some of the conversation around this? Cass, Amber, and Perry may well have other places they need to go, but they'll stay as long as they can. Thank you for your interest, and we'll see you next Sunday.